welcome back to another video. Here we go. Hope y'all had a great week. I had a pretty good week. It was good. Let me just jump right into it. Topic for today is the hearing this week. Social media hearing that took place and has been in the news a little bit. Probably should be covered a little bit more. But I think one of the most viral parts about it was when Zuckerberg had to stand up and apologize, or at least he did. He was willing to do so. And that seemed to be kind of where a lot of the media focus was this week. But here we're going to jump into a little bit more. It was a 3.5 hour long hearing, Senate hearing. And it had to do with, the main topic was CSE, or child sexual exploitation online. It was a long hearing, so maybe you could just watch this instead of having to watch all that. I know I did, and it wasn't the most interesting at times, but I think it was important. And hopefully we have some cool takeaways. Just to start, the CEOs, the people that were brought in to be interrogated by the Senate committee were one Snapchat CEO and co-founder Evan Spiegel, Discord founder and CEO Jason Citron, ex-CEO Linda Yasarino, TikTok CFO Shao Chu, and the one and only Mark Zuckerberg, leader of Meta, Facebook, Instagram. So as I noted earlier, a big part of the hearing, at least the primary part of it was CSE, and Amy Klobuchar was one of the first senators to speak early on about it. I just kind of want to give a little bit of an overview. I'm not going to dive too much into the nitty gritty to give you my little bits and takeaways. So she noted that between 2012 and 2022, cyber tip lines of CSE increased from 415,000 to more than 32 million. And there's at least 20 victims committed suicide in sexual exploitation cases. And to note, the room was filled with a lot of these families. So it was very powerful. And she also noted that it's been 28 years since the internet, and we haven't passed any bills because of the lobbying power of these companies. I just want to kind of introduce two main bills that I think are the biggest takeaway here. One is the CSAM Act. So this hearing acts as a way to kind of foster support for specific bills. So the CSAM Act, pretty much so it expands protection for childhood victims and witnesses in federal court, facilitates restitution for victims of child exploitation, human trafficking, sexual assault, and crimes of violence, and empowers victims by making it easier for them to ask tech companies to remove child sexual abuse material and related imagery from their platforms, and by creating an administrative penalty for the failure to comply with the removal with a removal request. So pretty much kind of making social media companies more liable to when underage people have been exploited, and they got tricked into sending some sort of a message to somebody that ended up not being that particular person that they thought it was, and then these things end up online. And a big part of the problem is that for like months at a time, social media companies wouldn't respond to these, and they wouldn't take them down. Because maybe they didn't have the power to. I mean, it was kind of a he said, she said as far as like whether or not, it obviously wasn't intentional, but whether or not, how easy it is for companies to actually target these specific examples. And so this bill would kind of like introduce some sort of liability to social media companies when they don't respond to a request, and that comes with a whole bunch of nuance, and it's a whole conversation in itself. But I also noted that, there isn't a lot of information from news organizations online about what CSAM Act really is. And I think that that's part of the problem, right? We have this discussion, and the media kind of just focuses on these, little hyped up events and gets little headlines out of it. Um, and, from there, um, sorry, my video just went, okay. From there, they just kind of, they kind of, they take a look at it, but not like too in depth. So I think a big part of it is media should be informing people on what exactly they're talking about. So the other bill that I wanted to talk about that got brought up is something that was passed a long time ago called Section 230. And so pretty much what this did, and this was also a big part of, and has been a part of this movement to litigate towards social media companies in recent years, is because Section 230 actually gave social media companies immunity for wrongful information on their platforms, which is kind of immunity from what we call libel law. So news organizations who report false stories or purposefully spin stories to hurt people in a negative way is actually illegal and has been illegal in this country for a long time. Like intentionally using false information. Whether or not it's applied anymore is kind of up for interpretation. But a large part of the hearing was we should bring that back to these social media companies. And a lot of the companies, they said, yeah, we do think there should be some sort of accountability, just not so much in the extent that if one little thing is out there that is, incorrect, then, we're held liable for that. That's ridiculous. That's originally why they weren't held accountable, because the idea is that social media is a marketplace of ideas. It's kind of where we have our society-wide conversations. And so those are kind of the two. There were other bills and acts that were brought up, but I just think that that's really the primary. That's really what this discussion revolves around, and what I think media companies should be informing people on, and then generating conversation about it, which they really don't. It's kind of just like, they show certain rants that senators did or whatever, or what Zuckerberg did with the apology, and all the coverage is about that. Another big part of the hearing was the mental health aspect of social media. And it's important to note that Zuckerberg in his opening statement said that, there's no real direct correlation between social media usage and increased rates of mental disorders. And that, for saying that, he pretty much got torn apart the rest of the hearing, which he was pretty much going to be the target of the hearing the whole time. He's the biggest name with the biggest company. But just some particular facts to know. Instagram company researchers found that Instagram is responsible for body image issues in 1 in 3 teenage girls. Increased rates of anxiety and depression amongst all groups were found for those who use the product. 37% of underage girls had been exposed to unwanted nudity in the last 7 days. 17% of self-harm content. 17% of underage women said that they had been exposed to self-harm content in the last 7 days on their social media. And the question that was asked to Mark Zuckerberg after that was, who did you fire when this came out? Which I kind of think it's a question that doesn't really get to the heart of what these social media companies are. You don't just, fire somebody who's like, there's not one person in charge of the way in which this entire thing works. It's kind of a product of the entire system in itself. But Mark, Zuckerberg, shortly after, he did stand up and apologize to the victims. So he apologized to the people in the crowd, who a lot of them had loved ones who were victims of sexual exploitation and who had, died, or some people were sold pills of fentanyl online, like family members. And he actually did that, and it was kind of interesting to see. But of course, that's all the attention goes to. Um, I don't know. And I think the entire hearing, it did raise questions. Is our technology greater than our humanity? That was one quote that was echoed. Kind of this idea that has technology escaped our grasps here, and how do we monitor and how can we reel that back in? I do think that my own analysis of the hearing. I think that, well, I think one thing to note is that the people who are in charge within these companies of monitoring this sexual exploitation, many of them have had to seek therapy in order to deal with what they see. It just kind of reveals that there are bad actors in the world, and they're going to take advantage of whatever technologies are existent at that time. And I think that social media and our internet in general, I think it just kind of speaks to the fact that it really ramps up all aspects of humanity, right? The good and the bad. And I think that, conversations surrounding the particular algorithms that social media companies use and have, and what kinds of dialogue they generate, especially politically, those types of things really have to be investigated. And I think that a lot of the senators in the room, I think they use some of the algorithms to their for political purposes. I think there's a reason that so much of our social media conversations have to deal with the extreme. And then, a lot of people in these rooms begging these questions, putting all the blame on these people are very much so also taking advantage of the system. So it does go both ways. I think that Senator Tillis, she asked a question towards the end. Or did she proposed kind of this idea. Was it Tillis? All right, maybe it wasn't Tillis. I forget who it was. But he kind of just came out and said, wouldn't you admit that the internet and social media is a dangerous place for children? And I just wanted to note that I didn't love the characterization of that question. Is it because it was kind of this insinuation that admit that your product is dangerous for children and that you are the bad guy here, towards these CEOs. And they do have a lot of accountability to take within themselves. But the idea that that's the lens that we should see it through, I don't necessarily agree with that characterization. Or you can say, okay, but our children are going to be living in a world where this is very much a part of their lives. So is exposure to the dangers of this type of a system necessary on some level, even when you're young, in order to learn how to deal and operate within that system, even though it bears risk? Would you say that, there's a lot of things that we allow children to do that are dangerous, but we also see that danger, there's some sort of outcome from addressing and learning how to properly navigate that danger that we allow for, because we know that it'll teach children when they become adults how to properly respond to that danger and not be so surprised when they see it in the world. So I think that's a lot of the conversation around this has to be, yes, there are terrible things that are happening to people on the internet, but it's also just a reflection of our culture. And these are things that exist. People like that exist, and the internet isn't going away anytime soon. So these are things that people are going to run into at some point in their life. Do we have to make sure that, at a certain age, there's no way that children, 13 and younger, 15 even should be seeing these things. But that responsibility really doesn't fall on the platform itself. I mean, that at that point it falls more towards our parents, our institutions, learning when should I expose my children to this type of technology. I don't think we can, I don't think we should throw out all the rated, the Hollywood producers who produce rated R movies because, children got into the movie theater and they saw it and they, it scarred them for life. That's not how we deal with something like that. And I think, just from speaking to my own experience, like when I was young, I think in college, very much so, in college and in high school, going on the internet, I had a very positive experience because it kind of helped me in my busy schedule of playing football, playing sports, seeing my friends. I didn't grow up in a generation that prioritized reading, but I did love to learn. And so I was really able to fill in a lot of gaps within a busy schedule by going online and kind of seeing what I was interested in. And in college, that continued as well in classes where I didn't have the ability to read in-depth philosophical texts for hours and hours a night when I had a lift in the morning and classes and practice at the end and a game on the weekend. I could go online and, I could read as much as I could, but yeah, I do admit that sometimes I would watch a YouTube video or I would, I'd find certain people through the algorithm that I was interested in. Because I was interested in it and I looked at content that was related to that, I could find people who had different perspectives on what I was looking at. And that was very much important to my process growing up. So that's just me. I know that not everybody is interested in philosophy and politics and religion and spirituality and all these different things when they're young. But I think this hearing very much reveals our inability to properly institutionalize our response to the internet. We're asking these corporations, who are okay with the fact that they're corporations, to also be the governing bodies that corporations never are, right? I mean, corporations, they make money, they have shareholders, they have certain things they have to do to stay relevant, to stay growing. But it's up to our institutions, not only legislation, but things like media, things like our education system, to better inform people about what it would look like to have a better relationship to these types of things. And in that, form policy based off of having a more informed public when we come to these things. Well, when I look at our modern news and even on some level, maybe we're just behind, but I don't see enough of an effort to truly inform people on what this is. So until I see that from politicians, until I see that from our media, I don't think that they have the right to put all this on the social media companies, even though they very much bear responsibility as well. But that's just what I think. Y'all have a great weekend.